So it's Rabbi Mordechai here. I wanted to give you an amazing introduction to the book of SHEMOT. We just had a huge transition from the book of ByRabbi to the book of Genesis, which is in essence the beginning of the world, the starting block of how everything comes into existence, how everything became the way it is. In fact, Rashi, the famous commentator, says in the beginning that because other nations in the future are going to have protests on the children of Israel being in the land of Israel, once they see the holiness of Israel and the greatness of Israel, they're going to accuse the Jewish people of stealing it and doing all these terrible things. So Hashem created the book of ByRabbi so the children of Israel will have proof to show to all the nations that no, this land was given to us and this is the whole process, right? So that's the book of ByRabbi. So now that we're transitioning into a new reality, right? Because the reality of Genesis, the reality of ByRabbi is a reality of total revealment. Everything's totally revealed. Everything's coming out. The creation of the world, the flood, the building of the Tower of Babel, Abraham being tested, having to do tests in front of the whole world, Yosef becoming viceroy over the whole world. You know what I mean? So all these things are humongous, expressions of revealment. Now we're going into this time of concealment, right? And as we talked about in other classes or conversations, we talk about like, hey, you know what? Right now, during the seasons, we're also in a time of concealment. We have to see how everything is connected. That we're in a time of concealment. We're in a time where the days are shorter, it's much colder, things aren't sprouting. If you look at the stars in the cosmos, the sun and the earth are the furthest apart. So there's a whole process of concealment that's happening all around us, and it's happening here. So when we think about the precursor to the book of ByRabbi, the Midrashim tell us, as we've spoken about before, that the world, before the physical world was created, there was 7 ideas that this world would be developed from, right? Before it came into existence, there were 7 things, right? And these 7 elements are the building blocks of everything that we're going to discover in this future reality, in the world as it unfolds. If you could imagine, that, like, say a person, a person builds a chair, right? They're like a carpenter, they build a chair, no pun intended, but they build a chair, right? But before they build that chair, they have to have the thought of building that chair. So you have the physical creation, which is physically building the chair, and you're busy with it. But before that process happens of the building of the chair, there's a thought. This thought that created the mechanism, the information, or the desire for the information that led to the manifestation of the chair started with a thought. In that same way, the physical world that you're living in right now started with a series of 7 thoughts, according to our sages, right? There were 7 main thoughts that the whole reality is built from, and from that, the world was developed. And, just for the sake of discussion, those 7 things are, the first thing is Torah, the instructions of reality. That was the building block. Before there was a physical Torah, the thought consciousness, that level of thought existed, or the energy that manifests that thought, it existed before the world was created. Before there was a Torah, there was the concept of the importance or the mechanism of the world being developed through this set of instructions called the Torah, right? And so underneath that you have tshuva, right? This mechanism that if a person detaches themselves from the proper order of the world, that there's a mechanism for them to reboot themselves, right? It's like you have in your computer, you can restart your computer. This is the idea of tshuva. You can restart your cell phone, this is the idea of tshuva. You can return back to the state you were before you damaged yourself, before you separated yourself. And then you have 2 elements underneath that are connected. All these are connected, but a little bit more. You have Gan Eden, which is what later manifested as the Garden of Eden, but it's a state of consciousness. It's the energy that exists today. And then you have Gehinnom, which is this concept of of hell, this idea of total disconnection from the Torah and the system, and no tshuva and these things. So you go into this thought consciousness of hell, of total disconnection, right? It's like you see like women. Sometimes I have friends of mine that are women and they're going through a lot of pain because they're single, right? But you think about that dynamic of that vessel wanting to receive light and not being able to receive that light, and the pain of that emptiness and the pain of that disconnection, right? This is that idea of hell, right? Is to be so disconnected and so empty and having no solutions and feeling all by yourself and going through this furious pain that it turns into almost a fire. That expression, that's hell. This is the dynamic of hell. So you have that, right? Then we have this dynamic of the Kisei HaKavod, the heavenly, the God's presence in the heavens, like Hashem's presence in the heaven. This manifestation that God, something that's beyond our imagination, something we'll never understand. God, that dynamic of God revealing itself, revealing its entity or its qualities in this world. This idea, we understand it through the Kisei HaKavod in the upper worlds. Number 6 is the base of Mikdash, which is the revealment of God's presence in the lower worlds, right? So there's the upper worlds and then there's the lower worlds. And so they work together, God's presence. So we understand it through the idea of the heavenly throne. And then we understand it through the base of Mikdash. But the root of both is God's presence in this reality that we're in. And the final one is the name of Mashiach. So these 7 things are the building blocks of all reality according to the Midrashim. So that got us into the book of Genesis, right? And we could take those same principles and analyze everything inside of the Torah. We can analyze the whole book of Bereshit from these 7 principles. Where is this concept of the Redeemer? Where is this concept of the heavenly thrones? Where's the concept of the physical God's presence in this world? Where's the concept of the state of mind of Gehinnom, the state of mind of Gan Eden? What is this idea of tshuva? What's this idea of the Torah? All these things, all these things, the halacha that's giving in the parshiot, all these things, we could find all these ideas inside of it. But this is the thing. The thing is like this. So now that we're going into the book of Shemot, a new reality, can we say the same thing? Can we say that we can look inside of the book of Bereshit and we can find the precursor to Mitzrayim, right? The precursor of Mitzrayim. And so, and to understand that the power of this, like, so I read an interesting Zohar yesterday, right? I was learning with my wife, and we were learning an amazing Zohar. And the Zohar was saying, if we understood the level of Yaakov, like Hashem said to Yaakov that I'm going to go into Mitzrayim with you. That's the message that Yaakov received from Hashem, that I am going to go into Mitzrayim with you, and I'm going to go out with you, right? And I'm going to go up with you, right? This is what Yaakov was told by Hashem. So the Zohar goes in, and the Zohar says, you have to understand what that means. It's not just like Hashem says, I'm going to be there with you, which is a huge statement in itself. So the Zohar used the example when Zipporah's father, a different Zipporah's father comes to visit Moshe. And Moshe, this is obviously, later on, and Moshe gets up to greet Jethro. And so Aaron sees the way that Moshe gets up to greet him, and he understands what's going on, and he joins in. And then people see Aaron and Moshe going to greet, and they said, and eventually the elders and everyone, all of Israel came in to greet Jethro because Moshe went in, right? Because Moshe went in, and everyone went in, right? So they say when the Torah says that Hashem went into Egypt with Yaakov, it was the fact that all of the heavenly courts, all the stars, everything that exists in terms of the spirituality of it, all came into Egypt. God's presence directly came into Egypt because of Jacob's marriage. Because of Jacob, God's presence directly came into Egypt. We can't even imagine that idea. We relish in the concept of like being able to speak to God, and the idea that God became so close to a righteous person that it was able to go into Egypt and bring the heavenly courts and all the angels. It's like, like sometimes, like, I don't know if you've ever seen these like football games or these big boxing matches, and it's like a stadium full of people, right? And all the lights are on and the whole thing, and it's like big production, the whole thing. And then so they come in with this helicopter view of it, right? And you have this helicopter view of looking down at this stadium with the lights, with this whole production happening, and all these people watching, waiting for this event. This is what Mitzrayim was. This is what Mitzrayim became, the place that the whole point of the whole world was to be manifested, was happening there, and everything in the heavens was a part of that. That's what was going on. It was fight night, you know what I mean? And the whole world was there. The whole spiritual galaxy was there, came in with Jacob, and came into the situation. That's how big it was, right? So the question is, where are the signs? Where are the signs that, if we're saying that there were elements that were the precursor to the creation of the world, what were the elements that were the precursor to this experience in Egypt? What's going on, right? So we're going to go to Parsha Lech Lecha, and it's chapter 15, verse 13, right? And God, and he says to Abraham, to Abram, know with certainty that your offspring will be aliens, they'll be foreigners in a land that is not their own, and they will serve, and they will serve them, the people of that land. They will serve them, and they will be oppressed by them for 400 years. The whole thing, right? So that pasuk created the reality of Mitzrayim. As Hashem is saying that to Abraham, that the molecules that will build this eventual empire, were being created, right? And you could arguably say it was created in the beginning of creation, but the process to get there was one of the steps of that revealment, was Abraham having that conversation with Hashem, and Hashem saying that your offsprings are going to be enslaved, and they're going to be in a foreign land, a land that's not their own, and it's going to be for a set amount of time. But it says, he says that the nation that is cruel to them, that nation's going to be judged. I'm paraphrasing. That nation's going to be judged, and they're going to leave with great wealth. They're going to leave with great wealth. This is what it's saying, right? It's saying that they're going to leave with great wealth. So when we look at this dynamic of Egypt, we have to understand that this pasuk created that idea, and then what happens later? A lot of things, but we're just going to go on key points. Yosef Hasadik is sold into slavery, right? Yosef Hasidik, he gets sold into slavery. He goes into Mitzrayim, the place we're talking about, and he becomes the viceroy. That's how Yaakov even is coming down here to begin with, right? To see Yosef, right? This is the whole point. And so this dynamic of Yosef is the precursor to Yaakov. But more than just that, this pasuk right here, this idea that they're going to leave with great wealth, great spoils, right? That idea of leaving with great wealth, this is Yosef Hasadik. Yosef Hasadik becomes viceroy. As the viceroy, they go into a famine. All the wealth of the world comes into Mitzrayim. All the wealth. Before Moses is even born. Before Jacob comes in there, before Jacob even knows his son's alive, all the wealth in the world is coming there. This pasuk is forming, is an expression of the reality that came in the beginning of time. This is what we're talking about. This is how big the concept of this book of Shemot is. This is how big the whole world, even the sages say, the reason why Hashem had to do Bereshit first is only because of this issue, because Hashem could have easily started the whole Torah with Shemos. It could have started the whole thing. The whole thing, you would have been able to understand the role of the Jewish people, the halakot of the Jewish people, the role that we play, the challenges we play. What was the purpose at the beginning? So that's the point. So the thing is like this. So we have this dynamic. So we have this dynamic of Yosef gathering all the wealth. So now all the wealth of the world is in Egypt. Abraham is told that his future descendants are going to go through persecution but leave with great wealth. Abraham's future descendant goes into a place called Egypt. Egypt became a place where all the wealth of the world was gathered. And this is part of the evolution of the wealth of Israel as a nation being established. The whole world, the whole world for this basis. So you know, when we're thinking about this process of our own evolution, right? The process of our own evolution, we have to be able to see our life during a series of seasons, where there's times of total revealment, and then there's times of concealment, and then we have what happens in Mitzrayim, times of total concealment. To the point that there was a time in Mitzrayim where there was a time of 3 days of darkness. You could say maybe that was the apex of the darkness of Mitzrayim being expressed, was the 3 days of darkness, where the Jews became wealthy, right? And so, or the precursors to the wealth. And so the point is just to say that as we go on this adventure of the Torah, we can't leave ourselves out of this. We can't just look at what's going on in nature and be like, wow, that's interesting how we're going through a time of concealment in nature, and we're going through a time of concealment in the Parshiot. Oh, it's interesting how the galaxy and the stars and the moons and the suns and all these different dynamics are interacting with Earth during a unique period, or during this process in a way that's affecting nature, that's also in line with what the Torah is teaching us, and also with my life. So now we're going to learn in this book of Shemos how to go through darkness, how to go through change, how to be okay with change, how to be okay with going through difficulties, and being able to have the end goal in mind. What is the end goal? The correction of my soul. What is the end goal? Me expressing my uniqueness. What is the end goal? Me fulfilling the purpose of why God gave me existence. And so by having that, all these things connected in my life, I'm going to be able to do things that I couldn't even imagine that I could do. But it only comes through the process of knowing how to navigate through life, how to navigate with all the influences of nature, the influences of the cosmos, the influences of the spiritual realms, all these things. How do I interact with it? How do I interact with these influences? How do I navigate? This is what the Torah is giving us. So the blessing to everybody is that we just continue on this process. And this is my introduction to the book of Shemos, the book of, and one other thing that's really important to add to this discussion. The Zohar also tells us that when the Torah tells us that a new king arose, right? When a new king arose, it's not just saying that, there's a perspective that, another king came in, or the value systems of the empire changed. But the Zohar says, actually, the kingdom expanded exponentially. That when the Jewish people started to come in to Mitzrayim and started to stay in the land of Goshen, the empire became even more influential than it was before. It had always had a lot of money. It always had a lot of cash, but its influence in the world became insurmountable. It became a whole new empire. And so this idea of not knowing Yosef is not just the fact of there was a new Pharaoh that came in and he did not remember or know the things that Yosef did, but it was the fact that the whole attitude of the empire also changed because of the amount of power that they received. And the Zohar goes on to say that, you know what? That the process of evolution, everywhere the Jews have went, because the galut, the galus, being exiled, that is a part of creation. So all the nations that we dealt with, whether it was the Babylonians or the nation of Edom or whoever the dynamic is, this dynamic is the greatness of those nations were there because they were hosting the Jewish people. Like, it's like this funny idea, like people say sometimes, they said, you know what, the food that you go to someone's house for Shabbat, and the food that's made is reflective of the guest, not the bayit. Like whoever the bayit's like, you know, the owner of the house, whoever, you know what, they're making, you know, the food for Shabbos, and they're making the food. How good it turns out has to do with the merit of the guest, right? So it's the same kind of like idea. The Jewish people, when they have to be exiled somewhere, Hashem creates what is needed to be created for that particular experience of galus that the Jews are supposed to go through at that particular moment in history. So great wealth and riches and infrastructure is there, because obviously that's a big challenge, you know, to be able to overcome those things and connect to God. So with all these different empires, so you understand, like Egypt was not a powerful nation before the Jewish people got there, right? Just like America is great because of the amount of Torah that is in the land, that is being learned, that you have places like Lakewood, and you have, you know, yeshivas like in Baltimore and in different places that are around America that, you know, Tales Yeshiva, you know, all these different places that brought so much light to the country and the goodness that that America has given towards the Jews, to give them this religious freedoms, Chabad and all types of places, to be able to centralize in America, to be able to spread Torah all over the world is part of the goodness. So this is why America is successful, and that should be this case all the ways. And so this is my introduction on Shemos. Baruch atah Adonai leolam, amen ve'amen.